The breakout success of Alex Garland's and Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later eventually led to the release of its sequel, which went by the name of 28 Weeks Later. Released in 2007, the standalone sequel to the classic original is often viewed as being inferior to its predecessor, primarily because it was perceived to be less gritty and without deeper and more nuanced symbolism. But regardless of that fan perception, the movie was indeed well received, so much so that people are still clamoring for a 28-month later movie. Which, by the way, we're apparently going to be getting a 28 years later movie. At least that's what I've heard online, as Cillian Murphy has expressed interest in working on a sequel, and Alex Garland, the writer of 28 Days, has stated that there are plans in motion to get us this new movie. Be that as it may, I personally prefer 28 Weeks Later to 28 Days, primarily because I find it to be more interesting. The movie is a real lesson in the importance of competency, and it also gives us a moral dilemma that the first movie simply doesn't come close to providing. In fact, my very first ethics in media video was on said moral dilemma. Click the link in the top right of the screen to check it out, or simply visit my channel. With all of that said, I actually want to focus this video on the lesson in competency that the movie teaches us. The lesson in question being that incompetence can make a highly improbable disaster into a reality. That's right, I want to dissect each major mistake made by the US-led NATO effort to rebuild and repatriate the United Kingdom. Beginning with the very first step in the process, they secured one area of London and began shipping British refugees into the country immediately. Perhaps it would have been better to clear and secure the entire city before doing this, because if they had done this properly, they would have found Alice, which is Don's wife. And with Don being out of the picture, they would have found out that she was an asymptomatic carrier. She would have been secure and the famous kiss of death would have never happened. She managed to remain hidden in the actual canon of the story precisely because NATO forces didn't clear the block she was in. Going house to house for every building and structure in London is a very lengthy process for sure. But given the nature of the rage virus and how it brought an entire fucking nation to its knees in 28 short days, I'd say such a lengthy process would be worth it. But the mistakes just don't end there. Why does the fucking janitor have access to military assets? Why did Don have access to a fucking quarantine room? They knew he was her husband. Why didn't they revoke his access immediately? They were testing her blood for signs of the virus. Why not take the extra step needed to fully quarantine her? Why not explain to Don that it wasn't safe for him to be near her until the test results were finalized? Sure, they didn't know that she was an asymptomatic carrier, but why fucking risk it? Why were there no guards to protect the room she was in? Where the fuck was the defense in depth? Even if Don managed to MacGyver his way into gaining access to the room, he'd be stopped by military personnel. Even if Don managed to magically get infected despite all of these precautions, why was it an established protocol to gather everyone into a literal concrete box where the virus could spread like wildfire? It would have been much better to have everyone isolated in their own individual apartments with doors and windows shut and barricaded. Soldiers could then track down the small number of infected and eradicate them one by one. But no, instead it was deemed better to just get everyone into a large coffin which wasn't even properly secured. And because of that very fantastically stupid decision, the number of infected grew tenfold within minutes. Let's go ahead and fast forward to the end of the film where Hawkeye's black friend ends up taking the kids back to France. Why didn't he check the kids for bites? We don't really know what happens, but it's heavily implied that the little shit eventually changed or somehow got someone in the helicopter infected. They believed he was immune? Well, that's one hell of an assumption. What if the kid merely had a greater resistance to the effects of the virus? We're talking about a virus that brought a nation of millions to its knees in less than a fucking month. There is no room for taking chances here, because the potential harm of a mistake is too great to risk. Those kids should have been left on the British Isles. The virus would have eventually burned out considering there weren't that many infected and also considering that the NATO forces were exterminating them with extreme prejudice. The kids could have survived just fine. And if they didn't, so be it. It's just mind-bogglingly crazy to me that this many mistakes were made. There were multiple instances where the situation could have been salvaged with intelligent procedures and competent leadership. The second rage virus outbreak should have never happened, but it did, precisely because of incompetence. Instead of a few people dying or instead of the British Isles being left a desolate landscape after the second outbreak, we are left with an in-universe catastrophe where mainland Europe itself is infected. We literally end the movie with the infected invading Paris. The implications of this are dire. If the rage virus demolished the UK, just imagine the amount of deaths we'd see in mainland Europe. While this chain of events has ruined the suspension of disbelief for some viewers, fact of the matter is, this type of incompetence does exist in the real world, which honestly makes this movie even more terrifying in hindsight. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also hit that notification icon so that you may be notified when I publish a new video. Don't forget that you may also opine anytime if you feel so inclined down in the comment section. I do try my best to respond to as many comments as I can during my free time. Last but certainly not least, I'd like you to consider becoming a channel member. It's pretty damn affordable and it allows me to continue entertaining you. With all of that said, I'm Captain Gold and hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.